installing Linux. It is one of the easiest thing to do and the funnest thing to do. So in this video you will learn how to install Linux, how to partition a drive for dual boot operating system or just to simple install Linux, what are different partitions that are required for to install Linux, what are components that you need to do in order to install Linux. So some plus points, some negative points, I'll tell you all in this video. So with that, let's jump to the desktop. First of all, let me tell you guys about this guide. You can go to google.com, you can type futureinsight.blog, and you will see my website. So this tutorial is also documented and you can visit my website. I will link this website in the description. You will go to post and then you will go to install Linux. So everything that I do in this video is also documented in the exact same matter. So you in this video you will learn what are the requirements, where to find it, how to download a Linux distribution, how to partition the drive, how to download an ISO, how to create a bootable USB, and if you're on Windows, on Mac or Linux, it really doesn't matter, it will tell you everything. Then how to install Linux. After how to installing the Linux operating system, you can it will give you some choosing recommendation, which if you're totally beginning new, where to start from. So to install an operating system you need basically three things. So the very first is an ISO, Linux ISO. So here it gets tricky. In this tutorial I will be going to using Ubuntu, but you can use Pop OS, you can use Linux Mint. If you are really confident, then you can go ahead and install Debian, and if you like command line, then go use Arch. You can use anything that you like. You can get these ISO by going to boot.com/downloads or desktop. They are over here at the time of this recording of this video. There are two versions of Ubuntu: 22.04 LTS version and 22.10. 22.10 is the latest and flagship desktop, and 22.04.LTS is their lifetime long supported version. That means it will get all the security patches, everything that is necessary to keep this ISO up to date. And the third thing that is required is a media creation tool. For if you are on Windows, you can use Rufus, or you can use Balena HR. So if you're on Windows, Rufus is pretty great, Balena HR is also pretty great. You can come here to my website, you can see all I have documented this pretty good well. So plug in, once you have downloaded your ISO file, in this case Ubuntu, you will open up Rufus by double clicking it. When your Rufus is open, you will select your ISO file. Probably it will be in your download folder, and select your file system. For the most of the time it will be GPT, and then you press start. It will give you a warning. It will erase everything on your USB drive, so create a backup. Then it will start to create a USB, and once it is done, voila, you have a USB that contains a Linux operating system and it's yours. So if you like to use it, use it. Don't, then don't. So from this point out, a section gets a little bit tricky because every computer is different from every computer. So you plug your USB into your computer, and you plug your USB into a USB port on your computer, and then you need to boot into that USB. So in order to boot, so it depends upon model to model. So in this case I have a Legion's 7 Slim, and in order to boot from a USB I need to press F2 on my keyboard simultaneously 2 to 3 times, and if I need to go to my BIOS, then it is F12. So you need to enable your USB boot from your BIOS. So here you need to be a little bit tricky and search for boot from USB from your BIOS. I need you to enable that. To enable them, you need to press F12 F12, F10, F9. Most of the time, if you're on Dell, then it's probably going to be F12, and if you're on Legion, Lenovo series, F12. If you're on Acer, it might be F2. But basically between F9 and F12 and sometime F2, these are most one common keys to boot into your BIOS or boot from USB. So once you are booted into your USB, you will be greeted with this. So when you boot into your USB, you will be greeted with this menu. This is the grub that will help you boot into your Linux or Windows. So for this point out, I will be try and install Ubuntu. It will read your ISO file and then boot you into the Ubuntu operating system from that USB that you have plugged into your system. And from this point, it will start to process, read. It might take a couple of seconds, give or take, depending upon the read and write speed of your USB. If you're using a Gen 2 USB, then it might be a little bit slow, but if you're using a Gen 3 USB, it's going to be pretty fast. So this is the welcome screen. You can install Ubuntu on your system, or you can try Linux or Ubuntu from that USB that you have plugged into your computer. So let's just go into try and just see how things are work. Second point, your resolution will not be this bad. I'm using a virtual machine, that's why it's a little bit not good. So let's just go to setting and change the resolution, display, and let's just go to 1080p 16:9, apply, keep change, and voila. So this is the settings panel. So this is the live environment. You can corrupt it, you can use it, you can Google Chrome and anonymously, and you do not need to worry about that you will harm your computer in any way, because you're using this system from a plugged in USB. So whenever you plugged out, it will not work. Second of all, you do not need to install it, and the purpose of live booting is that you can check your drivers, you check your Wi-Fi, you check your Ethernet, your dock, your monitor, everything that is you may want to connect, or you have already on everything on your computer. So you can connect to Wi-Fi. I have a wired connection, so that's why it is connected wired, but you can go into settings, and from network I am connected, but you will see a Wi-Fi option and you will be able to see the Wi-Fi. So you might want to connect there, and then you want to poke around everything and check everything is working or not. So let's just install our Ubuntu 22.10 version. So when you want to install an operating system, any Linux operating system, so the procedure remains the same. The number of partitions remain the same for the basic part. But if you want to do something advanced, then there are limitless options that you can view and try on. So let's just continue with our install, and you can select your keyboard. For me it is US, but if you're in UK, you can go with UK, or you have any other layout, but by default most of the time it is US keyboard. Continue, and this is the thing that I love about Ubuntu, Mint, and Pop OS, or any other flagship Linux distribution, that they give you a choice to install third-party non-free proprietary drivers. So what is a proprietary drivers? So those drivers, but basically what is a driver? A driver is a piece of software that helps your hardware to communicate with a software. For example, you're hearing a sound, those speakers need to communicate with your operating system to play that sound. Those connection is known as a driver. So if you're using an Nvidia card, or if you're using Go XLR, if you're using a Logitech mouse, or if you're using a bloody mouse, you can enable this, and what will do that it will go through the internet, and it will hunt and download the latest version of those drivers on your system. And believe me, installing Nvidia drivers on your laptop on Linux is a hassle. and this makes life a lot easier. So they give you two options, the normal install and the minimum install. So what is a normal install? A normal installation is they give you with a GUI interface, a bunch of games, a typewriters, um, a bunch of writers, for example MS Office, a couple of video editing apps, just like this in this live ISO. You can see all of these applications are pre-bundled if you go with normal installation. But if you do not want that bloat on your system, then you can go with minimum installation. If you're going with minimum installation, then you need to install those applications by yourself, but it gives you less packages and it gives you more control. So if you're an intermediate or advanced user, then you want to go with minimum. But for this case, I will going with normal installation and then continue. So the next part is the partitioning your drive. Now this is the most important part, and one of the part that remains the same no matter what. So if you just want to install Ubuntu and do not want to install your Linux operating system, then now we will partition this drive on your system. So first of all, so in order to partition your drive, you need basically four things. For most of the time you already have one, so you might need three things. So first, an EFI section. If you're using a EFI boot EFI, then you need an EFI. If you're using a legacy, then you don't need that. Second, you need a boot sector. Third, you need a Linux swap, and the fourth is your root folder, or you can say this as a C drive. So let's just create all four of them. If you're dual booting with Windows, then you don't need to create an EFI partition, because Windows might have already created an EFI partition for you, and you don't need to do that. So but in this case, I have no operating system and I will be creating partition myself. So let's just add. Now for an EFI, I will just give a 500 MB is more than enough, and for this I'll be going with EFI system partition, and let's just press OK, and it will go through and create a EFI partition. Now I'll be creating my boot drive. That will be 500 gig. 500 gig is just minimum for a boot drive. You can go above, but I would say 500 gig is more than enough, because there are a couple of boot files, a couple of MB files that does not require that much space. So the file system is going to be a little bit different depending upon the Linux distribution that you're using. Most of the time it is FAT32, but sometimes you need to select ext4. For the if you're using Debian, then you need to select ext4, driven from Debian. It's ext4. Then select your boot drive and then press OK. Now for the rest of my space, I will be creating a Linux swap. So I was just going for GB, and I will select this as a Linux swap area, and voila, it will create my Linux swap. So a Linux swap is basically a portion of your drive that will help to swap files from your RAM to your volatile storage. For example, in this case it will be your SSD or your hard drive. So whenever you put your PC to your sleep or suspend or hibernate, that all of your files from your RAM to your SSD or hard drive, so that they can be stored in a specific kind of way. So this is where swap comes in. Windows use swap as well, but it is not shown, or it is not visible to the normal user. It is hidden, but every operating system does that. Mac OS does this, Linux does this, and Windows does this as well. So let's just create the rest of the file, 32 gigs. I will just give to the root. If you are using Linux as your primary desktop, then you might want to go with more than 35 gigs. Since I'm not going to use this, 35 gig is more than enough. For my personal use, I have given 186 GB to my Linux installation and the rest to my Windows installation. And for this, I will be going with a ButterFS file system. So there are key major differences between ext4 and ButterFS file system, but that's a topic for another day. For right now, I will just go in with ButterFS, select this as the root, OK. So now it will create my partition, and now we will begin to install. It says that you have not created a EFI partition, but I have. So you might not get this error or you might not get this menu because you have already created an EFI partition when you install Windows on your system. So let's just continue. It will ask for your information that these are 4 partitions that will be created. You select continue and it will format them and create a new partition for your operating system. Then it will ask from where you are from. So it will auto detect if you are connected to an Ethernet or a Wi-Fi. Since I'm in Karachi, continue, then enter your name, Rafe, and then your PC name, your username, and then your super secure password, and then continue, and it will begin to install your operating system. Now this might take 15 to 20 minutes tops max, but if you have selected download proprietary software in the beginning where I have showed you, that it might take a couple of minutes, and when it is done, then we will be back and we are done. So now we will restart our virtual machine, but in your case it'll be your computer, and then you remove the USB and then press enter, and you will boot back into your operating system. And if you have successfully, you will see the corrupt boot loader, but in my case it is not, because I have no other operating system. But you will see another operating system with Debian and with Ubuntu, and then you will see Windows as well. But in some reality, if you do not see a corrupt bootloader, you might have messed up. You don't need to worry. Windows is still over there. So you need to boot. So you need to restart your computer and press F2, or you need to boot from USB without plugging the USB, and you will see Windows Boot Manager. So when you enter into Windows Boot Manager, you will boot into your Windows operating system. So that is pretty simple. So let's just boot into my installed operating system, and let's just fix the resolution one more time. And then once you boot into your live installed operating system, you can create an account, or I will just skip it. You can help canonical, you can send information about the system if you want to. I don't like this, so I will just do next and then do next. So I like to keep my location off and then do next and then done, and voila, you have an Ubuntu Linux operating system installed on your hardware, and you can poke around, enjoy it. And this is how you install Linux on your hardware and hopefully boot into your Windows as well. So here's a couple of recommendations for you guys, that if you're totally beginning new and you do not know how to which distribution to choose from, and you are just getting into, so the very first that I recommend is, without Ubuntu, is a Linux Mint. It's a great operating system, a stable version of a desktop environment called Cinnamon Edition. It is pretty much like Windows, but way better than Windows. The look and the feel may a couple of things resemble Windows, but yet some things do not resemble Windows. When you try it, you will love it. And it's pretty great for NVIDIA drivers, your desktop, for printing, for document writing, for editing videos, professional work, for smooth, for web browsing. It is too great. The second I recommend is Pop OS or Zorin. Zorin OS is a Windows lookalike, not a lookalike, but Windows inspired operating system. It's they have basically 3 versions: a pro version that you can pay for $39, or you can just get the core version that is totally free. So they give you multiple options, but if you have pretty low spec hardware, you can go with Zorin Lite as well. Zorin is a pretty good an operating system with its desktop environment, its components, its look and feel. It is too good. And the third one that I recommend is Pop OS. It's a pretty good. It helps you download a separate ISO for your NVIDIA drivers and for your integrated drivers. So you can pick and choose between Pop OS, and it's Pop Shop. It's pretty good with the official GUI. You can install applications. So these are three recommendations that I would go for if you want to get into Debian or Debian-like distribution. For if you want it to be used in an Arch or Arch-based distro, then I will go for Garuda, Arco, and Manjaro. These This is the Arco Linux. It's pretty good. Arco Linux is a good Linux distribution. You can Arco Linux gives you a bunch of options. You can install just the server code base using the GUI and no additional nothing, or you can go with full pack their themed desktop environment that come in GNOME, KDE, anything. Or you can go with Manjaro. Manjaro is pretty good. Manjaro, you can go with GNOME, XFCE, Plasma, Cinnamon Desktop, Budgie, Tiling Window Manager. Even they have a Docker image on their site as well. So explore. There are a lot of distribution, but the installation process remain the same no matter what distribution you are using. So I always say one thing, that distribution is just a starting point. Hop between distribution, get the look and feel, and get to know the operating system and see which operating system is different from another, and how you can mix and match different components to make your own operating system. For example, let me just give you my example. So this is my operating system. I'm using Debian as a core, and on top of my Debian I'm using a GNOME desktop environment, GNOME 43, with my theming, Tokyo Night, my terminal, the way I like it. So you can go this way, you can full-fledged desktop environments, or you can go the tiling window manager way, that you create, you pick and choose every single component and make your own desktop environment. So you might get something different and radical like I used to have, but I'll say if you are beginning, then go with GNOME, KDE. These two are one of the best desktop environment, and help you a lot. Just have fun while installing your operating system. And that is it from my side and from Infusion side. So there are a lot of new videos coming out in the following next week. So like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time.